some words to me. I'm Peer, and I studied computational social science in Konstanz, and I wrote my master thesis with David and Steve. And yeah, that's basically the work that was created within this master thesis. And I will continue to work on this for my PhD. So this is work in progress, and I'm happy to have like some inputs from you or a discussion. And also, like during the presentation, feel free to interrupt me all the time if you have specific questions. Otherwise, we can also have a discussion afterwards. Okay, I think I will share my screen.
May I just add, Per, that we're recording this meeting if you're
Yes,
fine with that, and it'll be then published.
yes,
Posted at the YouTube channel. Yeah? Okay.
yeah, that's no problem. Let me get that. Okay, so can you see the screen? Yes? Okay, cool.
Yes.
So the title of my thesis changed. It's now German populist rhetoric moves towards intuition, analyzing a change in the conception of political truth and polarization online and offline. And basically, this is part of the work within the Prodem Info project. I think most of you have heard about this project or know it very well. And yeah, I'm really happy that I could add something to the corpus of research here. Let me first slowly walk you through the agenda. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the social media platforms we want to analyze, and especially YouTube is kind of new in this area and has some unique affordances. So I think it's super interesting to also look into different kind of medias for this analysis. Then I'm gonna walk you through the data and give you a current status of the data. I'm gonna show you like the work packages we are working on. And then shortly, I talk about the methods. Maybe if we don't have that much time, we can skip this part because I think most of you already know about this method. And then I can show you some results from the data we have. Exactly. So I'm gonna start with like a really short motivation. So yeah, when I started my master thesis, I started to read about this problem info project. And yeah, I got really interested in this topic. I thought the theory behind that Steve built with Steve and colleagues was very interesting. And yeah, I read all these papers and I thought this would be super nice to do in German also. So my main work is transferring this method for German language and then applying it for different corpus of text. Yeah, exactly. But also other languages will follow. So we have done it now for English and German, but Shegun, a colleague of mine, is, for example, working also for Italian language and some other European countries to do a cross analysis. So let's just talk about YouTube and why I am interested in YouTube. So YouTube is a more unique choice of platform to do this analysis. And the idea basically came from a recent project where I studied toxicity and polarization in social networks on YouTube comments. And for that case, we gathered like a lot of political YouTube channels, German YouTube channels, which are from the extreme left, the extreme right, and centered. In this study, the baseline, and we also have these channels in this study were news channels. So I then thought about that, for example, the news category is the perfect baseline for testing something like evidence or intuition. So yeah, that's how I thought about YouTube, because we already had these findings that extreme actors are much likely to produce content with negative emotions directed at outgroup entities. But I was missing this piece of text analysis, which also talks about how the text is structured when we talk about misinformation or intuition-based language. So I was really happy to find this method to apply it here also. And also, what is really interesting about YouTube is that the format don't have restrictions in the length. So I have seen for the German case that there are a lot of politicians posting like really, really long podcasts or videos about their agenda, which you won't see, for example, on Instagram or Twitter or TikTok. So this is also a reason why I'm interested in that, because a lot of the more sophisticated political discussions are also taking place on YouTube, which is super interesting. Yeah, so we have some pros and cons, or some points that are both. So we have a very low organizational control, and often if a content piece gets deleted, there's a really flexible range, and uh, the content creator can decide on which comments to delete. So this can introduce a bias when analyzing different channels on YouTube and the comments beneath the videos. Um, yeah, and also we have seen that there we encounter a lot of like soft news or news with like um, presented in a more emotional way, which placing individual political actors in the center and not the topics. And I think this stems from the format that it's on video also. So you have also not only the text signals, you have also like visual signals and stuff like this, which we weren't able to analyze. So we just looked at the video transcripts. Okay, so let's run through the other platforms. So I think X or recently Twitter is a very well state by the art platform to analyze. Several papers have shown that X is used for agenda settings and elite communication. So yeah, this was really clear that we also want to look into German X posts from politicians. And yeah, also X has been shown to have like a higher emotional intensity than, for example, other baselines like the German Parliament, which is due to the format of short messages, the instant real-time feedback, and news dynamic. So these are all factors which, in theory, could encourage intuitive language. And thirdly, this is our baseline. So we analyze German Parliament data. Um, So we gathered, I think, but I will talk later more about the data. But we gathered basically all speeches which were held in the parliament, and this gives us the opportunity to also analyze signals in a more historical context. And also, we use this data because it's like really a lot of speeches to train our own models. So we have like a more specific domain model, which I think is quite cool. Yeah. So yeah, these are the three platforms we are looking at. So now I'm talking shortly about the Protem Info project, or the theory behind. But I think most of you are like really familiar with that. So yeah, basically the topic's about the ontology of truth, which was built. And yeah, a lot of people have already shown that there's a gap between the perception of honesty and the reality. So this was showcased with multiple examples already. One example, for example, was Trump, who has repeatedly shared statements which has been proven to be wrong, but still there's like a honest perception of a large sample of US society. So yeah, I think the one sentence which stuck to my mind the most when reading these papers was the sentence, "Untrue statements can be honest." Yeah, and I think this is really narrows it also down for political elite communication. When we talk about this intuition-driven language, they don't have to be honest, but they still can cause damage, or they still belong to some kind of misinformation, even if it's not shared intentionally. So I think this is also really important to analyze um, basically the rhetoric of these texts or of these discussions. Then, if we go a little bit deeper, we can distinguish across two dimensions, inward and outward facing, and person and world. So there is a relevant distinction, but we also have seen when trying to quantify these concepts, um, they tend to really lay very same or very similar dictionaries when we try to find a set of words, which, for example, defines evidence-based language. This is really close to fact speaking. So there are like theoretical nuances, but I think when I looked at the dictionaries, basically we had like maybe 3 or 4 words different. So yeah, so I'm more interested in this outward facing versus inward facing construct. Um, exactly. And when it comes to truth, multiple examples also have shown that a disbalance towards intuition and less evidence in political content can have very dangerous implications, right? So one really stark example, and we also showed this in our analysis, was the reliance on an internal intuitive truth of a better human race showcased by the Nazi regime, which we can actually find in parliament speeches. And we can also show that during this time, like intuition-based language basically skyrocketed. And I think we're not quite sure what the reason behind this is, but we can see this for multiple crises that we see a change in rhetoric. And yeah, I also think that this has to be or has to do something with like war rhetoric, right? Yeah, but just to give another example why it's important to balance evidence and intuition-based language in political discussion is, for example, that democratic societies have to have this common corpus of truth, which is based on belief speaking or evidence-based language. And for example, um, if we think about elections, we have as a society have to have this trust or this common ground truth that these elections are fair. Otherwise, democratic processes get really difficult. So yeah, I think these signals are really important to measure in political discussions. So yeah, this was the short wrap up of the data and the theory we want to apply. I'm gonna show you the research pipeline now. I'm gonna do this quite fast so we can have a discussions laterward because I think the results are more interesting. So, but basically we gathered all the data from the parliament speeches and the Twitter data, YouTube data, and then we trained a domain-specific embedding model. And then this was subsequently fine-tuned on the tweets and transcripts, depending on which platform we analyze. And this led us to a time series, right? So we chose a time frame, we calculated the scores in this time frame, and then we can see how these scores changed over time. So the first thing we really want to look into is on an aggregated level if there are any shifts toward intuition or evidence-based rhetoric in political German social media content. And then to distinguish further, we want to look for different political ideologies, and we really want to look into extreme actors. So we want to see if political actors from the left and right extreme differ in their use of language over time. So this is really the second research question I was looking for or answering. And I think these are the two I right now put my focus on, and also for future studies, I really want to go in this direction and have a comparative approach between different media and even maybe track the same actor across different platforms and see, for example, if he acts differently in Parliament than he would on Twitter. Yeah, but this is for future projects. And the um, third layer of my work was to get this connection. This was only done for YouTube, so we got all comments of the videos we analyzed, and then we calculated different signals for populist language or for negative sentiment. We created a polarization score, which is also based on this distributed dictionary approach. Yeah, we got an hate speech classifier, perspective, toxicity, and a sentiment for the comments. And somehow then we try to connect the choice of language in a video and see if it has an impact on what is posted in the comments. So basically, the idea behind this is so, for example, when a really extreme actor talks about uh, an opposite politician in a really intuition-driven way, I would expect, for example, that in the comments, then the same politician is, for example, attacked more often in the comments. So this was kind of the hypothesis behind this, that intuition on the supply side or the creator side can have an impact on the discussion which follows later on behind that initial post. So exactly, that's basically the main project. Here's again the data. So we gathered all the parliament speeches of the German parliament. We gathered 40,000 videos of 23 channels between the time frame of 2015 to 2025. For these videos, we got all the comments, and then also we collected all tweets of German MDs in the parliament or of those who have a Twitter handle. And this is also done between the time frame of 2015 and 2025. Exactly. Um, just shortly, I want to talk about how did we choose the channels, because this was really also a huge part of the work, which I did in my master thesis, because it's really hard to find like scientific papers who are stating that a specific channel is for extreme, or for example, right extreme or left extreme. So yeah, this was a really long process of online research, looking through articles, looking through channel descriptions, looking at web pages of NGOs, and really like sophisticated categorizing these channels into different labels. And it's like super hard to do. And this is also one big point of the critiques here, that yeah, it's hard to put these channels all in a label. Even if we go across parties, because for YouTube you also have these individuals which are not in a party but post political content, and we still wanted to classify them. So this was really hard to do. And there are, for example, some edge cases in Germany, like Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, which is a new party, which came out of the left. But it's really hard to classify them now as left or right, or there's not that much information about it. So yeah, there are some edge cases. Then let's just talk quickly about the method. So we have these two dictionaries. We translated them from the English version to the German version. And then we had a survey asking people in German if how they would rate these words for evidence and intuition on a scale from 1 to 5, I think. And based on this, we chose the words or deleted the words from the keywords. So I think this process can really be read in the papers before, or also in the paper from me. I think it's a really state-of-the-art way to find dictionaries which are defining a specific construct, right? Then we train a word-to-vec model with all the parliament data we got. And then we average the word embeddings of an input text and the dictionaries we just gathered. And basically, then we can calculate the cosine similarity between this piece of input and the keyword average embeddings. And this gives us a score for intuition and evidence. This is then set scored, and to have like one score which is high for really high intuition and low evidence, and low for the opposite, we calculate the EMI in the way that we subtract the evidence score from the intuition score. So I think that's all you have to know for the results I'm going to show you. So this is really the first thing I want to talk about. And we have done this again because yeah, I'm going to talk about this. So first of all, we sampled 1,500 speeches across the whole time frame, across parties and across EMI. And we did a second survey for the EMI scores. And asking raters if they think this piece of text from a speech is, in their opinion, intuition driven or evidence driven, also on a scale from 1 to 5, I think. And then we took the top 20 percentile to classify them as evidence or intuition based language. And then we scored an AUG of 0.7. So this is quite okay. We can at least show that we are measuring something. Yeah, so this is the time frame of the German parliament. This is just a really short part of my studies because Shigun is working exactly on this also, but for other countries. But we can see that there's something happening between the years of 1930 and 1945, right? So intuition is really high there, and evidence kind of drops. So therefore, the evidence minus intuition scores also is really low. Later, we did this we aggregated this per legislative period, but we have seen also that there's really low amount of data during the times of war. So maybe this could also be a factor that this is such an extreme reaction, right? Yeah, secondly, we did a really large corpus analysis of really all corpuses. So we calculated the evidence intuition score for every word in the corpus. This is an example of the YouTube corpus. And then we calculated keyness and we plotted some scatter plots where each dot is one word, based on what the intuition evidence score of this word is. So, and I think the main part we can take from this is that we see that there's a distinguishing between words that have high intuition and high evidence, and those actually make sense. So, if we look on the right scale with high evidence, there are words like analyzing, research, study, studies show. And if we look on high intuition words, there's like naive, truth, mm, optimism, opportunism, enemy. So these do make semantic sense. What we haven't found is for the opposite direction, so negative cosine similarities don't tend to have like a really semantic meaning. So our third robustness check here was to recalculate all the scores, but ignore all words which have a cosine similarity less than 0. So because David was really afraid that this might introduce a bias and that we have some words with super negative cosine similarity which don't make sense at all. And for example, one party is using this word more often, and this would really skew the analysis. But we found that even when we use this two different kinds of deriving the evidence minus intuition score, we were able to, they were really high correlated. And I think it was 0.95 or something like this. So even with that robustness check, I think the method basically stays the same. And also a really interesting finding for this is that we have high correlation on the document and on the word level for intuition and evidence. So word or texts with high intuition score tend to have also a higher evidence score. And this is also like a little bit of a problem. But it really depends. In theory, I think for the document level, it really makes sense that a piece of text can have both intuition and evidence in it. And also in a theory, we say that intuition per se is not a bad thing, because emotions are also important in text and in politics, but it's more the relative distribution of intuition and evidence in text. And if we see if intuition dominates the discussion, then it can get dangerous. So yeah, I think these are the two main findings of this scatter plot. Okay, I hope you still are with me. I don't know if I'm a little bit too fast. Yeah, cool. Because now I think the most interesting findings come. We can now see the time series of the three platforms. So I'm gonna start with the parliament data. So now we focus on a time frame from 2040 to 2025, and we have updated this. So this is my old analysis, my old data. We now shows a same time frame for all the platforms. So we have like can do these plots where we show three platforms beneath, but for now we have to look at this. So here is the time series aggregated, and we can see the EMI scores of all speeches in the parliament. And I think for this one, it's really interesting that we can show that there is a drop in EMI, and this drop correlates or happens at the same time where the right extreme party AfD got elected into the parliament, right? So this was 2018, and right before 2018, there was like this big discussion about the AfD joining the German parliament. And so for sure, we cannot do a causal claim here, but we have shown with topic analysis, for example, that these topics dominate this time period, and that at the same time, intuition gets really high. And even after this time frame, after 2018, we can see that there was the shock, and then EMI just has a new base level, which is a little bit lower than before. So I think this is a really interesting finding. And then just for like statistical reasons, we also gathered the first 4 years and the last 4 years, aggregated taxes, and we did, for example, t-tests to test the difference between EMI between these periods, and they were significant. So yeah, this is really the first thing. This is just aggregated. Later on, we fit a mixed effect model. And with this mixed effect model, we also could show like a negative trend for EMI and a positive for intuition in this time frame. Now, when we look at the differences between political labels in the parliament, we can see that this EMI drops for all parties at the same time, and when the AfD joined or the right parties joined, they join in with a lower EMI level, but also for the other parties, the EMI was lower. So I think this is quite a interesting finding, I think. And what we also kind of see often is that there is not that much difference in evidence-based language, and this might be for like the way of how the parliament structures text, or how formulary text has to be in the parliament, because this per se is, I would say, more towards the evidence-based manner. But we see differences in intuition. So that's why also in the theory, I focus a little bit on intuition-driven language. So we can see for the intuition score that the right-wing parties have like a statistic significantly higher intuition based language. Okay, now let's talk about Twitter. Twitter is also kind of interesting, I think. So when we look at Twitter, we can see on the aggregated level this downward trend. And now from this point on, I also talking about the Russian invasion on Ukraine, because we have found this for Twitter and YouTube, also in a topic analysis, that these topics were dominating these time periods of 2022 and afterwards. And this is also, we can see from this time, a significantly drop in EMI in tweets posted by politicians. And exactly, also, if we look across the time, we can see a rise in intuition, but also in evidence, but not that strong. That's why we also really focus on the ratio of evidence to intuition. Yeah, and I think this is this could be quite concerning. This finding, yeah, we have seen historically time periods where intuition based language is dominating the discourse. And I think this is a really interesting finding, that basically also when I talk about all three platforms, for all three platforms we can see that intuition-based language is on the rise in elite communication. And we link this later on to populist rhetoric. So yeah, I think this is quite interesting to look at. If we distinguish between parties, basically we see the same here. We can see that for evidence-based language or for the evidence score, there are no real significant differences. But when we look at intuition-based language, we really can see that the right-wing actors on Twitter post text which tends to be closer to intuition keywords than the other parties or other actors. And therefore, we have a like significantly lower EMI score for them. And this is also tested with an mixed effect model, and we can see not a downwards trend here for all parties, but we can see a different baseline, basically, just like a lower baseline of EMI for right-wing actors. And also, interestingly, a slightly higher baseline for left-wing actors. Yes. So let's go to the last platform, and then we have some time for discussions. This is YouTube. YouTube differs a little bit from the others. which I think is quite interesting. We still haven't figured out why these distributions are so weird in comparison to like other platforms. They are not normally distributed, and this really makes it hard to t-test also for differences. Um, yeah, we think it maybe has to do because we corrected for length. We corrected for correlation with length. Because firstly, my first impression was, okay, we have like, for example, shorts and we have longer videos, and maybe these two are really different in their content. But so far, this wasn't the reason. Then I also thought because of the topic analysis, we had like these two topics. For example, one is like war related, and the other one is like other political content, which are really maybe this is what we see in this bimodular distribution, but also doesn't seem to be true. So yeah, this is something I would like to discuss with you later on. Yeah, what we see in the timeline is a small downward trend in EMI also. And again, there is something changing in the rhetoric after 2022, which again is the same period which we looked on Twitter. And we also see that intuition is higher for that, and it correlates with evidence basically. But again, here the ratio is important, and it's the same thing basically, that intuition is higher than evidence there. And yeah, this also comes with the founding or the starting of right-wing actors on YouTube, which tend to post a lot more videos also related to Corona or the Russian invasion on Ukraine. We see like if you look at the total videos, there are like a lot of right-wing videos in this time period. So lastly, let's again differentiate by par or by label. And here, which is quite nice, I think we have this baseline or this comparison baseline of evidence or of news and science videos, and we can show that these have a like higher baseline of EMI. So this is quite like an additional robustness check, which I quite like. And we again see that for right-wing actors we have like a really low EMI. And again, that this is more rooted in the use of more intuition-based language and not specifically evidence-based language. And to address like the last research question where we wanted to check whether this choice of language on YouTube in the videos has an impact of the comments, we calculated the toxicity scores of all comments aggregated beneath a video. And we can see that for right and middle leaning channels, the comments tend to be much more toxic, especially for the like more established parties like the Greens. They receive like a lot of hate in their comments. So I have looked into some of these comments quantitatively, and we also have like annotated 500 comments for each constructs by ourselves for like having like a check and F1 scores. And yeah, perspective was the one performing the best, but also yeah, this shows that toxicity in the comments is a problem and that hate speech does exist on YouTube. And that these also co-occur with like intuition-driven language in content posted before. So if you look at the also a mixed effect regression we did of the toxicity or how toxicity in comment and EMI in video is related, we can see like a negative correlation. So I think this is also quite a finding, and this quite a goes in hand with the studies before where they check. I think I cannot check or I don't remember exactly, but I think I don't know how the effect was called, but I think they checked for tweets and the replies and showed that, for example, if a tweet is high in intuition, there is this effect that the reply is also more likely to have high intuition. So yeah, I think this is a construct which also holds for different signals of this type of populist language, which we were able to show here. So I think so far these are the main findings I have. Right now I'm going more towards more the direction of finding out how we could construct an EMI so we can compare it between corpus, because right now we z-score the corpus, and this makes it impossible to take a score from the YouTube corpus and interpret it in a way so that we can compare it to a score from the Parliament corpus. and I'm really working on that, so we can have like a one score which can be compared across different copies. So we just have an input text and then we get a score which would be the same independently of which corpus it's from. So yeah, that's the main direction I'm going towards now. Yeah, and then there are some critiques or some challenges I would like to have the talk with you when it comes to this method. And one is, for example, that I have seen like a lot of extreme actors posting or having the jargon of scientific language, but actually don't posting like scientific content or uh, still posting misinformation. So this is something we really cannot detect. We can just detect if this kind of text is close to a set of keywords, which defines, for example, intuition-based content. But if someone is using like super scientific jargon but still spreading false information, we would label this text as evidence-based, right? And also this comes with sarcasm, or another example is that I had a video of a science channel explaining populism, and therefore it named like serial examples of populist language, which led then that this video was classified as intuition driven, which it was not. It was a science video, but that's really the problem of contextualization here, which is really hard to, when we use this dictionary distribution approach. Then it's really hard to do this causal inference stuff when we want to look at effect of supply side and demand side. So what I was talking about is that content creators text can influence how the discussion goes beneath this text. We thought about some approaches like difference in difference, or even if we have enough data to match, for example, two videos who are exactly the same but only different intuition, and then see if there is an effect. But yeah, this is still work in progress and also really hard to do. And also one thing David and I are working on right now is to integrate like another way to measure these constructs of intuition and evidence. And I think as a lot of people do right now, we are experimenting with like transformer models also to maybe find a prompt, or yeah, to somehow add to this framework with like a new way of calculating these scores. So yeah, but this is a really work in progress and not um, that finished yet. And yeah, there's maybe one thing I want to show also, which is quite interesting. We showed, because I talked about that this correlation is also a problem on the word level. And if we show how close the words in the actual keywords for intuition and evidence are, we can see high cosine similarity between some of these words. So we can also see that there's like a semantic overlap of intuition and evidence, and that there are words which have high correlation to both set of keywords, which basically means that this explains why we have this correlation on the word and document level. But I don't think that's a problem, because also in theory it's okay for text or words to have both, or to belong to both. These are not mutually exclusive concepts, right? So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for your attention so far, and yeah, let me know if you have questions.